Our listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Citizen Baraza. In this episode, we are going to be talking about taxes, especially the Tax Appeals Tribunal. I think this is something all of us have little knowledge about, and I believe we all deal in something called taxes because we are taxpayers. So today we are here to get to know if I have a problem, let's say you are a who do I report to? And that is where the Tax Appeals Tribunal comes in. And today with me, we have the Chairperson, Tax Appeals Tribunal, who is going to be shedding no light about this issue and how you and I can be helped. I'll give her a chance to introduce herself so we can dive right in. Crystal, you're welcome, Natasha. Please say 12 seconds.
Thank you, Desire, and good evening to our listeners. My name is Crystal Kabajwara, and I am the chairperson of the Tax Appeals Tribunal, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Crystal. So I believe most of us know very little about the Tax Appeals Tribunal. I believe in some don't even know that it exists. So please help us know.
Thank you, Desire. So the Tax Appeals Tribunal is an institution whose mandate is to settle tax disputes between taxpayers in Uganda and the Uganda Revenue Authority. It is established by an Act of Parliament, which is the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act of 1997. And this mandate to resolve tax disputes is derived from the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. We are located on Nick Building on the 8th, 7th, and 6th floors. However, we also have registries across the country to cater to the regions where we have taken our services closer to the people. So we have registries in Mbara, a registry in Mbara, we have one in Gulu, in Mbale, and in Arua. The tribunal is comprised of 8 members and 1 chairperson, and we hear cases in panels of 3. So if you have a matter and you have a dispute with the Revenue Authority, you come to the tribunal, you file an application, and we shall be explaining to you later how you do that. And this matter or this dispute is heard by a panel of 3 members.
Oh, it's also help me understand. Is it like if I have a case against URA, do I, as an individual, am I allowed to come, or I have to come like as a company or as a group?
Of course, as you'll appreciate, taxpayers come in different forms and sizes. So you have individuals, so you can be a taxpayer in your individual capacity. And we tend to see those especially in the rental space where you own a building in Kampala or you own apartments. So those could be individuals. We have small businesses as well, small and medium enterprises. Then we have the large corporates. So the tribunal is open to all kinds of taxpayers, from the small to the big and to individuals as well. So what normally happens is that you will be subjected to an audit, for example, by the Uganda Revenue Authority, and they'll issue with an assessment in most cases. And when they issue an assessment, they should explain to you the reasons for the assessment, why they don't agree with your tax position. And in such a case, if you do not agree with their position, then you're supposed to object to URA. And when you object, they make a decision either confirming their earlier assessment or amending it or vacating it altogether. So when URA makes that decision and you're still not satisfied with that decision and you're contesting it, the tribunal is where you come to for redress. You then come to the tribunal and you file an application with us, and we then proceed to hear the matter to determine whether the URA assessment should be maintained, whether there's tax to be paid, or whether it should be vacated.
So in layman terms, that's like a court.
Yes, we are a court. We are a court, and we are a court of first instance. What that means is that for any matter concerning taxation, that matter has to be filed before the Tax Appeals Tribunal. You don't go to the High Court first, you come to the Tax Appeals Tribunal. And the reason for that is because we are specialized. We deal with tax matters. We are experts in taxation. So we are able and we have the ability to resolve tax disputes and reduce the amount of cases going to the High Court. But that said, should we decide on a matter and you don't agree with us as a taxpayer, or the URA does not agree with us as well, then they are free to appeal to the High Court for further redress.
So am I allowed to, can I come with like my lawyer? Can I represent myself? Or am I even an opportunity to go to like a regular court?
So like I said about the regular court, we are the court of first instance. So we are the ones you come to first when you have a dispute before you go to the high court. Yes. And regarding whether the taxpayer can represent themselves, one of the attributes of a tribunal is that it's supposed to be informal and less technical than proceedings in the high court. So if you come as a taxpayer, you're free to represent yourself. You don't have to come with a lawyer. You don't have to come with an accountant. Just come as you are, and we shall guide you through the process, and we shall also help you where matters can become technical. We simplify it for you so that it's easier for you to get redress with us. So a lot of the time we encourage round table discussion. So if you come as a taxpayer, you'll sit on one side of the table. We shall also call the URA officer who issued the assessment. We sit together and we try to understand what the dispute is about and how we can help you resolve that dispute.
So about the disputes, can you help explain in detail how do they arise? How do we get there?
How does a dispute arise? There are two parties to a dispute. For tax matters, it's the Revenue Authority, which is URA, and the taxpayer. So for a dispute, there are two matters. That's why there are two parties. The Revenue Authority, the taxpayer. These parties have conflicting interests. So on the one hand, you have a taxpayer whose main key objective is try and pay as little tax as possible. Then on the other hand, you have the Revenue Authority, whose objective is try and collect as much as possible. In fact, if you look at the trends over the years, URA's revenue targets have been increasing. I think the last time they appeared before Parliament in April, they did indicate that their next year's target will be around 36-point-something trillion shillings, up from 31 trillion shillings. So you can see the revenue targets are increasing. So now because of that conflict, there's always going to be dispute around how much tax am I supposed to pay? Is what you have assessed, is it correct? Is it the right amount of tax? So now, how the disputes arise? One, on the taxpayer side, you find that most taxpayers or some taxpayers are not compliant. They're not filing their returns. They're under declaring their income. And in some cases, extreme cases, that some of them are evading taxes. Then on the URS side, you'll find a compliant taxpayer, you have audited them, but your audit findings have errors. Or you have misapplied the law, the tax law. So that creates a dispute. And when the parties fail to agree, when the two fail to agree, they then come to a tribunal for redress. So that dispute does not begin when you have filed the matter before the tribunal. It begins by your compliance behavior and also the behavior of the tax officer who is assessing you. Are we together?
So help us understand, is the tribunal an independent body? Does it listen to both sides?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we are an independent body, and it's actually provided for in the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act that we shall be independent of any person, any authority. We don't take instructions or directives from anybody. So we are independent. We listen to matters independently in panels of 3, which really ensures fairness. So that your matter is not heard by one single member or by the chairperson, because that way it's easy to influence the person. The matter is heard by a panel of 3. And we are not an extension of URA. There are people out there who think we are part of the URA, but we are not part of the URA. We are not an extension. We sit independently and review their decisions independently.
Okay, thank you. So how does that tribunal help a citizen who lacks like legal representation, or they don't even have much, like you said, some people fail to file their taxes. Maybe they don't have that knowledge. Is that a way you do it? Is that where you go?
So as a Tax Appeals Tribunal, we don't just settle disputes. We also help taxpayers and also the URA to understand their obligations under the tax law. So if you come to the tribunal with a dispute against the URA, what we normally do, we have a session called conferencing. And at conferencing, we invite the taxpayer. And we also invite the URA, not the legal department, but the officer who made the assessment. So that they can come and you say, okay, taxpayer, what is your problem? So they tell us their story. oh, you see, on this date, URA audited us. Then they gave us numbers. We didn't understand them. We asked for explanations. They didn't give us explanation. Okay. URA, why did you give the taxpayer an explanation of your assessment? So we have conversations with you. So if you're a taxpayer and you don't know the procedure, the process, we guide you. We help you understand and break down complex tax language that could have been used in a URA letter or generally in the law. We help you explain that. So there's a lot of effort that goes into informalizing the procedures and making it comfortable for any ordinary taxpayer. If you even don't speak English and you speak Luganda, we can have that conversation with you in Luganda to help you understand what the dispute is about. Now, if we establish that you as a taxpayer, you have problems with your records or you didn't do the right thing, we explain to you what you should have done in the first place and what you need to do going forward to ensure that you're minimizing the risk of a tax dispute coming up in the future, or you're minimizing the risk of an additional assessment being raised. And like I told you, the majority of the taxpayers who come to us are SMEs, small businesses. And the challenge is that segment is that corporate governance is poor. You find that the owner of the business is the accountant, is the secretary, is the driver, doing everything. So it's difficult for them to be able to manage their own business when you're doing all that as a single individual. So we give them advice on how they can professionalize their business, what they need to do differently. You need to have an accountant, you need to have financial statements. And with taxation, if you don't have documentation to support you, you'll be assessed. So we try as much as possible to educate, to sensitize and inform the taxpayer, even when they are in our courtroom.
So do you also move to the rural areas to find taxpayers there, or you only concentrate here in Aga, in Asaka, Balapik? Because I believe actually most people are affected the most.
And that's a valid point you raised. We have, like I told you earlier, we have registries, stations in upcountry regions. So we have in Mbara, we have in Gulu, we have in Mbale, and we have in Arua. In fact, next week, at the end of next week, which is on the 29th of May, we shall be in Gulu. In the first week of July, we shall be in Mbara. And I think sometime, I guess, at the end of July, we shall be in Mbale. So we keep rotating, going to different stations to hear tax cases and matters, because we appreciate that taxpayers can't travel all the way. If you're in Fort Portal, you should be able to file your application in Mbara. If you're in Lira, we shall find you in Gulu. So we bring our services closer to our people.
So all your services, like utilize a vehicle name, or it's something written?
So we have a website where we disseminate information, especially matters that are coming up before the tribunal. That is published every week on our website. Even decisions that we make as a tribunal are published weekly on our website. We upload them. They are available to the public. But also, we have digital channels of communication. So we shall upload any notices, decisions we've made. You'll find them on our Facebook. No, we don't have Facebook yet. You'll find them on our X handle. You'll find them on LinkedIn. But we also make use of WhatsApp to disseminate our information via various WhatsApp groups.
So what are the most tax disputes that you've taken in, the regular ones, the common ones?
I guess what you're asking is what kind of disputes, tax disputes, come before the tribunal.
Yes.
So we have, there are disputes, one, that are arithmetic or reconcilable differences. What that means is that URA has assessed you, saying you owe 10 million. But a taxpayer is saying, no, it shouldn't be 10, it should be 8. That is just arithmetic. It requires the parties to reconcile and see, how did URA move from 8 to 10? And you, the taxpayer, if you're saying it should be 8, how do you explain this difference? So it's about providing information. Now, for those matters which are arithmetic, we have a team of mediators. So when you file a matter before the tribunal, we send you to the mediators to try and help facilitate reconciliation and mediation between the parties. And the majority of our matters, by the way, are handled via mediation. They don't go through the full-scale hearing at the tribunal, like a court of law. Then you have the other segment of matters which require interpretation of the tax laws. Now, matters that require interpretation of the tax laws, we tell the parties, which is the URN and taxpayers, to put in what we call submissions, to file submissions explaining their own interpretation, and there the tribunal then provides its interpretation. But other times you have matters which are a mix of both. It's both a matter of interpretation and also a matter of facts, where you have to adduce evidence. So in that case, we go through what we call a trial. We call the parties, they bring their witnesses, they explain what happened, how it happened, and then we make a decision.
So are there some measures that you put in place as a tribunal to build trusts between the taxpayer and URI? Mostly the taxpayer.
I think the first thing is to ensure transparency. And like you said, like I explained earlier, that we sit in panels of 3. So that is the first stage, to ensure that your case is not being listened to by an individual who can be easily influenced but he's said by a panel of 3 people. But also, the public knows that at the tribunal, we have 0 tolerance to bribery. So you can access justice free of charge without having to pay for it. And then we're also transparent in disseminating our decisions widely. So you can find our decisions on almost every platform that you'd like to access, whether it's WhatsApp, whether it is X. You'll find them readily online. And why that's important is when you read the decisions, you should be able to see the logic and how the decisions were reasoned. So that provides taxpayers with a certain level of comfort on the fairness of the process. It doesn't mean that we should always get it right. Sometimes you get it wrong. Or I could make a decision and you don't agree with my conclusion. But whatever the case, you should be able to logically follow through my reasoning. And if you don't agree, there are avenues for appeal, where you go and appeal to the High Court, which then reviews the decision that we made as a tribunal, and they either agree with us or they'll not agree with us.
Thank you so much, Christopher. So as an entity, I believe there are challenges that you face internally, and you believe there is a way the government can better support you. So please, you can share some.
Well, I'll classify challenges into perhaps 2 categories. Those which can be supported by government and those which can be supported by the taxpayers themselves and the URN and the parties who come before the tribunal. Now, in the first category of those that can be handled by taxpayers is when you file a matter before the tribunal, please be present. Ensure that you follow through. Most cases we come across cases where taxpayers file their matters, they abandon them, they lose interest, or sometimes when the revenue authority may lose interest in a matter and then come back after some time, to pursue it. So that back and forth creates for us challenges in terms of managing our caseload, because our services are on demand. So it's important that you're not filing cases with us and blocking access for other people who need redress. From a government perspective, of course, challenges are always around funding, because investments have to be made continuously. Tax is a dynamic landscape; it's changing every year, not just on a local scene, but also on an international scene. So there's need for continuous investment in capacity building, in knowledge and resources and information, but also in digitalizing our systems and processes. All that requires investment, whether it is virtual conferencing, live streaming, case management systems, all that infrastructure requires continuous investment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if this is right or it's not confidential. If you could share with us like some examples of like some success stories that you guys have been able to solve.
Statistics? Yes, I can give you statistics. Let's begin with statistics. For example, on average, how many? Okay. So in terms of statistics, currently, as of today, for example, we have 495 disputes before the Tax Appeals Tribunal. And the value of those disputes, because we look at disputes in terms of value as well. is about 1.2 trillion shillings. 1.2 trillion shillings. I don't know how much money currently PDM is looking for, but if I unlocked that money in the tribunal, we could potentially cover a budget item in the national budget. Now, in terms of the number of disputes that are being filed on, because we track the disputes being filed on a monthly, on average, you receive about 35 to 40 disputes per month. So the filing rate is high. What that means is that you have this kind of revolving door of disputes. As you're closing these ones, new ones are being filed. Then we also go ahead and look at the profile of disputes that we have. So of the 495 disputes, I can break them down and say how many of these are small and medium taxpayers. And we've done that analysis, and about 80% of those are small and medium taxpayers. How are we able to tell? We can tell from the tax in dispute or the tax being assessed. If you're being assessed 10 million, 20, 50, that is usually a small business. Then the other 20% is the big corporates, the large corporates. But that small segment of 20% of the big corporates have the biggest value because the assessments are big, at billions of shillings. So while I have a caseload of 1.2 trillion, you'll find that almost 800 billion is only shared by about 50 large taxpayers. So there's a balancing act to be done to ensure that you're creating access for these small, medium enterprises to ensure that you're resolving their matters very fast, but also putting aside time to resolve these bigger disputes, which are complicated. Are we together? Yes.
Oh, interesting. So what's can you give us like a brief highlight about Uganda's tax policy?
In terms of taxation, the overarching aim of the government of Uganda right now is to increase what they call domestic resource mobilization. What that means is that as a country, we should be financing our budget and our needs from taxes being raised from taxpayers within Uganda. So how do you tell whether a country is raising enough taxes to fund its needs, its financial needs, or to fund its budget? There's something called a tax to GDP ratio. So right now, our tax to GDP ratio is about 12.5%, 13%. And the target is to raise it to above maybe 16%. The higher that tax to GDP ratio, the better the economy is doing in terms of raising taxes to fund its operational budget. Over the years, we have historically relied on external financing in form of aid, in form of foreign debt, and also local debt. So what government is trying to do right now is to reduce on our reliance on external funding or financing and increase more reliance on tax collection. And of course, that's the obvious strategy because, as you know, there has been a reduction in the amount of external financing coming to the country. If you see what's happening with USAID, with donors and the like, external funding is reducing. So as a country, we must increase our revenue collection to be able to fund our budget.
Thank you very much, Crystal. Thank you so much for your time. And our dear listeners, I hope you heard it right from the chairperson, Tax Appeals Tribunual. Don't be there scared, wondering, URA has me by the neck, where I go report to. Who can hear me? The Tax Tribunal is put in place just for that. They're available online. They have offices regionally. Please feel free to contact me. It's been good having you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Desire.
Thank you.